Hey, my name is Mark Bergering. I'm a photographer and filmmaker, and today I wanted to talk through some ideas on how to shoot adventure wedding photography. To give you a little background, my wife and I have been photographing weddings for over a decade, and we've definitely shot our fair share of adventure elopements, people out in wild places, and so we wanted to share some tips. Previously, we did a video on adventure wedding photography advice. Today, I'm going to be focusing more on framing, composition, time of day, getting to the location, and lastly, a little bit about equipment. So stick around, we'll go through those topics, and hopefully you can learn something. So when it comes to framing and composition, this is a whole topic on its own when it comes to photography. But I think when it comes specifically to shooting outdoor weddings in beautiful places, our philosophy has been to kind of share the story of the landscape because that's so important, the people and the experience. And so with that in mind, I think creating clean photographs that give all three of those elements is the key. So to do that, you want to frame up your images in a way that can tell a story, eliminate some distracting elements. You want to focus in on what's important, the landscape, the people, and not have a lot of distracting things in the background. So making sure that it looks clean, pristine, and hopefully you're in a place where there's no power lines or other kind of man-made objects that are distracting in the background. So that comes down to location selection, but it also comes down to framing and composition and creating an image that looks natural and beautiful. Additionally, your job is to draw the viewer's eye through the photograph and kind of create a sense of depth. And by doing that, you will create a more interesting photograph that people can look at for more than just a quick snapshot, something that will kind of cause their eye to move through the image in a way that's interesting. And I think that, a really good step in doing that is to make sure that you have foreground, middle ground, and background. Foreground doesn't have to be, it could be as simple as creating something that kind of blocks part of the image and it causes your eye to transition from that out of focus element down to the subject, and then also making sure that you have something in the background that is dramatic. Often where we shoot, it's going to be the mountains, but it could be the ocean, it could be a coastline or a cliff or something that is going to contrast with that foreground and middle ground so that you have that depth and so that you can cause the viewer's eye to move through the photograph in an interesting way. Another topic that I really like to emphasize is the use of compression. So that's taking your long telephoto lens and making that landscape kind of squished together in a way that it feels like the background is right behind your subject. So if you shoot with a 70 to 200, opting for that 200 millimeter focal length, or maybe you shoot with a longer lens, maybe use a 100 to 400 and you're zooming way in. And when you do that, by narrowing your field of view, it makes it so that subject appears right in front of the backdrop. So even if there's just a small peak in the background, by using a super telephoto lens, you can emphasize and make that object appear larger, especially in relation to your subject. Alternatively, the opposite of using compression would be using a super wide lens. So we love the 16 to 35. There's a variety of lenses in that focal range for various manufacturers, but using a super wide lens will allow you to capture the full scene and making sure that you showcase that dramatic landscape. And I think if you like shooting with that wide lens, you're going to want to be careful with your location selections because you can't hide anything. If you're going to shoot with a super telephoto lens and there's a whole bunch of distracting stuff around, you can isolate that subject. But when you shoot at 16 millimeters, you see everything. So being aware of your location and making sure that you choose, a direction to shoot that is going to be interesting and not have any of those kind of distracting or negative elements. And then the other thing I like to think about when I'm framing up a photograph is having some kind of movement or connection. Movement is awesome if you can get people moving through the frame. Walking is usually the kind of baseline standard, or stepping up onto a rock or something that just gives a sense of movement, and it isn't such a static, just people posed in the photograph. An ideal way to do this is to do it naturally, is to have people, kind of capture the whole experience, and making sure that you're shooting during those transition times. So when you're hiking into the location or driving into the location, pardon the thunder that's happening here, but when you're moving through the scene during those transition times, I think you can really capture a sense of movement and tell a story. Another way to get people moving and not so static is to encourage them to dance or be silly, tease each other. Anything that gets them moving a little bit and just isn't just a static, flat-footed image is great. And if people are going to be static, let's say you have them pose in a precarious place or near a cliff or on a rock or something where they don't have as much mobility, just making sure that they have interaction and connection between each other. And that will allow you to feel a sense of emotion in the photograph, especially your clients will be able to feel that. So if you can't move, at least have a sense of connection. The ideal is to have both, but obviously it's limited by the circumstances you're working under. Next up, I wanted to talk about the time of day. And this may be obvious to some people, but light is the most essential thing in a photograph. And so getting great light requires you to work with the best time of day. So for us, that's early morning, in the evening, sunrise, sunset. And then a little bit less, obvious is working during blue hour. So either before sunrise or after sunset. There's often a really beautiful glow that starts to happen, especially as the sky transitions from having color to just like a deep blue color. That's a great time to use artificial lighting, off-camera flash. And here's a video, I'll put up a card or down in the description that has more details on that. But that's a great time to utilize off-camera flash during blue hour to contrast your warmer subject or light with that blue deep color of the background. So other than blue hour, when you are shooting at sunset and sunrise, you'll have that kind of golden light, which is awesome. And sometimes it can be tricky to decide how you want to use it. So, the two most common scenarios that I would say we use are front lit and backlit. Front lit is great because it has, it's really crisp and clear, and it you can highlight a subject against a dark backdrop if you angle it just right, or you just get a really nicely lit photograph if it's directly front lit. It can also be interesting to shoot backlit, shooting directly into the sun. And when you're doing that, I encourage you to find that point where the sun meets the shade, whether that's walking around in your scene to find that spot, or even placing the subject behind something, a rock, a tree, or even your subject, just so that you don't have a full power blasting sun backlit in the background of your image, because that'll be a little overpowering. If you can kind of find that line in between the sun and the shade, that's often an interesting place to make photographs. And then I would say lastly, one of our favorite times to shoot, which is a little trickier to pull off, is stars. Usually you have to wait at least an hour and a half to 2 hours after sunset. So it can, even if you shoot blue hour, there's still a gap of time if you're trying to get sunset, blue hour, and stars. Or in the morning, the reverse would be stars, blue hour, sunrise. But you will have a gap of time if you want to photograph the stars. So just be aware that you're going to have clients that are going to have to wait around. And another tricky part of it is it's also usually kind of cold at that time of day, depending on the location. And you have to be in the right location. You can't be near a city or any artificial lighting, even from just buildings, will make it difficult to capture your couple and the stars. When you are photographing the stars, you're going to have to use kind of all the techniques. You're going to have to use off-camera flash. You're going to have to use, pretty dialed in camera settings. You won't be able to use autofocus. It takes a lot of manual effort, which can be slow, and it's especially slow because of the long exposures. You're looking at probably a minimum of 15 seconds exposure to get a good sky. So that's, just a slow way to work, and you can't fire off a whole bunch of frames at once. With that in mind, we're usually only looking to capture, 1 or 2 or 3 different star photos. So planning it out ahead in your mind, what you're going to capture, where you're going to be, when, and thinking through it in the daytime is often a great way to do it. So you can kind of look at what the elements are and imagine what's going to be lit up and make sure that you have those things dialed in, so you don't end up in a location and then you have all this ambient light that you weren't expecting that's preventing you from creating the image you wanted to. So now that we talked through framing, composition, time of day, it's important to think about getting to the location. So because all this stuff is dependent on timing and the light, it's important to make sure that we get in the right place at the right time. So thinking through how long it's going to take to drive to the location, hike to the location, however you're getting there, and make sure that you account for enough time without having so much time that you're standing around and your clients are wondering, it's not even near sunset and we're supposed to photograph the sunset, what are we going to do for the next 2 hours? So it can be a little tricky to plan and gauge and estimate how long your travel is going to take. With that in mind, it's also important to think where the light's going to be. We're often working in the mountains where you have the sun going behind a ridge line, so you have to plan out where you're going to be, where the light is going to hit that location at a certain time. We use the Photographer's Ephemeris 3D app, and that's a great way to map out exactly where the light will fall at different locations at different time of year, because the sun changes throughout the year. So once you've gotten to the location, you're all primed and ready to go. Lastly, I wanted to kind of talk through a brief equipment section here. So when it comes to photo equipment, hopefully you have a good sense of what things are needed and what's not. I think it can be tempting, especially as you're going further away from the car, to bring too much equipment. And I think we've all been there, but me especially, I tend to bring too much. And it can really hinder your experience if you're having to carry that equipment in, you're hiking. You want to make sure you have what you need without having too much, because that'll just be heavy and cumbersome, and it often slows you down because you're swapping lenses unnecessarily and just dealing with equipment as opposed to being focused on the subject at hand. I'll put a link down in the description to kind of our basic minimalist photography kit. I think that's a good starting point if you want to carry minimal gear, or maybe you're on a budget. Either way, have a look at our kit and you can see what we like to bring and what has worked well for us over the years. Lastly, if you want to dive more into off-camera flash and lighting tips, I'll put a video up here as well as down in the description so that you can learn a little more about that and our philosophy there. I think it's a really important thing that often gets overlooked when people photograph kind of this adventure elopement photography style. People often opt for natural light only, and I think there's something that's definitely missing. If you can add off-camera flash, I think it can really make some dramatic images, and do it in a minimalist way that's unobtrusive and relatively efficient to do. I think it's a great thing to learn. So have a look at that video, and let me know if you have any comments. I'd love to hear your feedback. If you have any questions, if there's anything we can help with that you'd like to see a video on in the future, leave a comment down below. And thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.